were my lifelong friends from Ozona. We attended school together, and we were in the 4-H clubs together. Enid Fulford Fishman and Phelan Green Allison, and they're going to tell us the history of Ozona.
Do you want me to go first? Thank you so much for asking me to come tonight. It's really a privilege to tell you about my roots, as they are deep in this area. I am proud of my heritage and of my ancestors. First, I have to start with Sutherland to get to Ozona. Great-grandfather William L Thompson homesteaded 45 acres in Sutherland, Hillsborough County, right after the Civil War. He served in North Florida during the war, and later he bought land, additional land, from present-day US 19 north side of Nebraska to 21st Street, and north to Beacon Groves. The original cedar post is still 1.5 feet underground at the corner of Nebraska and 21st Street. This is used today by surveyors as a starting point when they are surveying in the area. My grandmother, Georgia Thompson Fulford, her inheritance was 10 acres at the corner of US 19 and Nebraska, where Shoney's is today. And the only 1 acre of the original homestead is owned by Agnes Thompson, who's continually been in the Thompson family. And she lives across the street from the Lutheran church. And I'm so glad to see Doris here, because her husband was also a great-grandson to William Lawrence Thompson. Glad to see you, Doris. William Thompson and his wife, Julia Holland Thompson, were charter members of the Curlew Methodist Church, the only church in the Dunedin area, and it was started in 1869. Also, it was the second church in the Pinellas Peninsula, only the second church in the Pinellas Peninsula. So if you can imagine how sparsely settled it was then. In 1882, Mr. Thompson started Midway Baptist Church of Christ in his home. And in 1886, a church building had been constructed on 5 acres of land donated by Anson P.K. Safford, president of the Lake Butler Villa Corporation and founder of Tarpon Springs. The church building no longer exists, but the cemetery, Midway Cemetery at the end of 16th Street, is there today. And this is a picture of my great-grandparents and their youngest son. And this is their second home, built on the homestead. The first one was a log cabin, and I have a picture, but I misplaced it and I couldn't find it. I enrolled in a Florida history course at junior college some years ago. My instructor said one definition of history is his story. In my case, it's her story. Let's keep that in mind as I try to give you bits and pieces of the early years in Ozona. I was born in Ozona, in the house that I'm living in on Orange Street. Yellow Bluff appeared on the Hillsborough County map, which is this one up here. Names of the homesteaders or the landowners are on this map. So you can just picture how few people were here at that time. This was This map was adopted by the Hillsborough County Board of Commissioners as their official map, and it's dated down here, 1882. When the village of Ozona celebrated its centennial, I believe that was in 1982, this map was used as a starting point, a starting date for Ozona. Uncle Walton Whiters is believed to be the earliest settler, taking up land under the Homestead Act. He built a log cabin on what is now Bay Street. His granddaughter, Morcy Whiters Moore, told me that board siding was added later. This house, along with the old Methodist church and the parsonage and the Hendry home, all burned one night. That was in the early 1930s. Uncle Walton was born in 1826 and died in 1905 and is buried in Curlew Cemetery. Many of his descendants live in the area. Later, W.B. Futrell bought 40 acres and divided it into town lots, and that was the beginning of the village. Charles Bergstream received a patent for 155 acres in 1885 under the Homestead Act. This was signed by President Grover Cleveland. He and his wife deeded 2.02 acres to the Orange Belt Railroad for $1 in 1889. Ozona native Henry Tenney remembered hearing Charles play reveille and taps each day. Could be heard all over Ozona as he was in military service. His wife, Wilhelmina, served the community then as a midwife. And Peter A. Demons, a Russian nobleman, brought the railroad to this area. He was beset by all kinds of problems along the way, finally getting trains to St. Petersburg. In 1891, he went broke. The line was taken over by the plant system. The Atlantic coastline then took over in 1902. The old depots along the route had resemblance to the Russian architecture. My son, a railroad enthusiast, gave me this old 1908 timetable, and it shows that Sutherland and Ozona were 3 minutes apart. But at one time, Palm Harbor had a depot, Ozona had a depot, and later they combined and had the Palm Harbor depot that the old-timers probably remember. Tenney Avey and Ira Tenney Wood, sisters, were prominent residents in the early years. Both were born in a log cabin, Aunt Ivy in 1863 and Ira in 1872 at Curlew, 2 miles from Yellow Bluff. Aunt Ivy, as she was affectionately known, married L.H. Avey, who came here to regain his health. Now they went into the mercantile business on the waterfront, where, let me see, I think I have, this is a picture here. The sailing vessels used to stop. And 17 barrels of fruit that were ready for shipment froze in their store during the freeze of 1886, and people couldn't pay their grocery bills, and their business was wiped out. Later, they built the Avey House, 1 block over, which became the Ozona Inn. I think you have pictures of that in your book. Ira married William Dwayne Wood, and the newspaper article in 1970 quoted her as saying she helped organize the Ozona Village Improvement Society in 1893. for the purpose of building a town hall and sidewalks. Of course, back then the sidewalks were made of wooden boards and had to be replaced every so often. Excerpts from the Society's minutes of April 11, 1906 prove that both of these goals were accomplished. Quote, the Society met in regular session. Treasurer reported having $82.92 in hand. Expenses for sidewalks, lamps, and etc. deducted, leaving balance of $29.65. I'm sure that money went a lot further than it does now. It was decided to have a May Day picnic and to sell ice cream. And if the boys wanted the hall for a dance, they could have it on the night of May 1st. They can have it at the usual price of $2.50. And this was signed by Susan K. Whitford, secretary. And my dad, Albert Fulford, was one of the boys, and he played the piano for the dances. And Dr. H.K. Whitford and his wife Susan, along with Dr. L. Richardson, settled here in 1889. They came here because of the invigorating Gulf breezes and the pure air, bringing some patients here to recuperate in this good climate. They disliked the name Yellow Bluff as they associated it with the yellow fever epidemics that we had in Florida. It was reported that in 1887, panic-stricken from earlier sieges, the exodus from Tampa was so hasty that lamps and stoves were left burning. The name was changed to Ozona in 1889 according to Alan Morris's book, Florida Place Names. Mr. Morris was clerk of the Florida House of Representatives for many years. Dr. Grace Whitford was educated in Chicago and became a graduate MD. She married Dr. H.E. Whitford, son of Dr. H.K. and Susan, in 1909. And this is Dr. Grace's picture. After winter visits to Ozona, they settled here in 1912. Dr. Grace did not intend to practice here, but since there were so few doctors, they all four of them, took the state medical exams and practiced in Florida. The ladies of Ozona decided to organize the Ladies Village Improvement Society. Dr. Susan was its first president, and she served in other capacities too for some time. Dr. Grace, in the newspaper article that I got the information from, said that perhaps this was the oldest women's club in Florida, and the oldest women's club building still standing and being used. Dr. Grace received much recognition and was president of the Tuberculosis and Health Association of Pinellas County, chairman of the District 4 Public Welfare Board, just to name a few of her accomplishments. She retired from the staff at Morton Plant Hospital. Her home and medical office was on the site where Bob and Jean Noel live today, and that's down by the waterfront, near where the old dock used to be. She was my doctor and brought me into the world. The campaign for West Hillsborough to secede began in earnest in 1906. One complaint was that they could not get roads from a county government seated away across the bay in Tampa. With threat of secession, a real road for those days, a graded and shelled road, was constructed from Tampa to Ozona. Willard Whitehurst, one of Uncle Walton's sons, was West Hillsborough County Commissioner. He lived in the Ozona area and played a big part in getting the Tampa Road built. Well, the people in the down part of the county were very unhappy because that road went nowhere near them. So 6 years later, Hillsborough did break away and became Pinellas County on January 1st, 1912, with a population of just 13,193. Ozona seemed to have some influence in county affairs, as another one of Uncle Walton's sons, Marvel Whitehurst, was elected the first sheriff of Pinellas County. Can you imagine someone living in Ozona getting elected to a county office now? His home was on the southwest corner of Orange and Bay Streets. Marvel's daughter lived there when Faye and I and Reba were growing up, and she served us as our volunteer 4-H leader. We often met in her home. November the 10th, 1914, 31 qualified electors met in the town hall and voted to incorporate the town of Ozona. Faye, that's when only men could vote, isn't that right?
I don't know, but I know women couldn't.
They didn't get the right to vote till later, I believe.
Had to work for it too.
Pardon?
This year.
Anyway, I have a list at home, and I think it's only men. Only men listed. And L.H. Avey, I've mentioned before, was elected mayor. H.L. Grider, he was our depot agent in Ozona, the town clerk, and T.A. Gaines was the treasurer. A.N. Fulford, my grandfather, was elected tax assessor, and I happen to have a town of Ozona, his tax bill for 1916. I guess I'm a saver of things. Anyway, and my uncle, Ben Fulford, was elected the town marshal. The corporation lasted a little over 3 years, and we don't know, but we think perhaps maybe World War I may have caused this. A good percentage of Ozona's young men enlisted in service, including my dad, who served in France. He was discharged. When he was discharged, he came home by train, arriving at Palm Harbor Depot. He walked to his home on Lemon Street, through their grove, and slipped in the back door in Ozona. And he sat down at the piano and started playing his favorite music. And can you imagine the surprise, how happy my grandparents were when they heard the music and knew he was home. That was one happy homecoming. And I forgot to show you, this was their home on Lemon Street. It's no longer there, but they owned a good portion of the land, and they had a grove there. And this is the family, including the grandparents. All except one child wasn't born in this picture. And this is commemorating the 100th anniversary of the Midway Baptist Church, which is no longer there but the cemetery. And it shows the descendants of the people that were living at that time. Thank you.